Wonderful. Okay. Well, hello and welcome to our brand new podcast, CX Voices, in partnership with CXM. I'm Katie Kemshell, and today I am joined by the brilliant Adam Winkworth from Age UK. Adam, tell us a little bit about what customer experience means to Age UK.
Yeah, of course. Firstly, thanks for having me, Katie. It's a pleasure to be here. So when we talk about customer experience at Age UK, the brilliant charity that I work for, we actually are talking about human experience. So the people we support on our customers are older people who are often living alone, don't have access to the same social activities that many of us have the privilege to do so. So they're not looking for a quick transaction that you sort of will experience in most customer experience situations. They're looking for connection and friendship. So I am the national manager of our telephone friendship service. So in a nutshell, what we do is provide weekly friendship calls to older people across the UK. In the last year, we provided 5.3 million minutes of friendship to older people. So that's a lot of customer experience or human experience that we've delivered. Monitoring that is really important and understanding the impact of our human experience or customer experience. But it's really, really important that we put older people at the heart of how we develop our customer experience, whether that's digitally or whether the services we provide.
Yeah, I love that. And the kind of services that you provide are clearly fantastic. Give us an example of what a good experience could look like for a older person who is using your friendship services.
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of the older people, we support a huge range of diverse older people from different backgrounds, different ages. So I think it's really important to firstly say that one older person who might be completely alone and have no older people, have no one else there to support them, may benefit from our service just as much as someone who has lots of older people around them, and family. And it's about supporting all older people regardless of their situation. So I think one story that really sort of sums up the impact of how amazing Age UK and the telephone friendship service are is I spoke to an older lady. Now, this was a few years ago. I spoke to her. It was the first call that we made to her after she referred herself to the service. And she was talking about her experiences of loneliness and the fact that she used to play her own voicemails back every day just to hear a voice in her house, which was really, really sad to hear. But that was her only form of connection or only way of sort of feeling with someone or being with someone. And that really, really touched me. And a couple of years later, I checked in on this person. I still remember her name. And she's now got a telephone friend. And actually, in one of the most recent surveys, she said that the service is a lifeline to her and she doesn't know what she would do without her telephone friend. So although that person still is maybe on their own and doesn't have those people around her, the power of a telephone call has really transformed her life, and no longer is she relying on listening to the same voices on a voicemail answering machine. She's actually got someone. And I think it's really important that sort of accessibility to our service is really, really simple. And that's what customer experience really means to us. It's making it as simple as possible to help an older person. So there's a lot of complexity that goes on in the background. But the whole point of utilising all of our technologies is to make it a really, really simple but life-changing experience for someone. And that older lady is always someone I think about when someone asks me a question like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's incredible. I can imagine a lot of people hearing that story. It's actually quite hard-hitting, isn't it? To think that somebody's in that situation, it really is genuinely changing lives.
Uh-huh.
And I know for yourself, you must hold quite a responsibility in terms of the services that you're then delivering and how you're trying to improve that service, whether it's emotional or practical or social help that you're kind of providing for those older people.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, as I mentioned, we've got a huge service. We're supporting thousands of people every single day. So it's really important to know that also our service is a 365 days a year service. It's not just the hardest days we're there for people. We're there every day for thousands of people. But it's also really important that we deliver a safe and a trustworthy service. And that's where our customer experience is really important. That trust is something that we're looking to deliver to our customers or our older people. So it's a huge responsibility. It's a privilege to have that responsibility, and when it works well, you can clearly see the amazing impact it has, which is great.
So let's get into. So I love the word trust, and I know that's it's something that is so key in today's day and age where we've got a lot of conversation around AI. I know you guys have been doing some really quite exciting, groundbreaking things in terms of your experience that you've been delivering and bringing in AI. Talk to us a little bit about what you've done and how that word trust has kind of been introduced into the process that you've gone through on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we've this is something I love to talk about, and it's been really quite groundbreaking for us at AGK, but also for the older people we support. So, as I keep mentioning, that our scale of our services is huge. We've delivered over 5 million minutes in the past year. But because we are delivering a large-scale service, we need to make sure that the conversations that are happening are safe and appropriate, and making sure that we're providing support not only for older people, but also providing support for the thousands of brilliant volunteers that we have. So one challenge that we encountered was that we wanted to review a certain number of calls to make sure that everything was going well and that the older person was kept safe. But what this involved was our staff team manually listening to sometimes up to 3 hours worth of calls. But often those calls were completely fine and completely safe, whereas there were sometimes shorter calls where there were real risks happening that were being missed, and we needed to find a more practical way of identifying actual risk going on and putting our resource onto those calls instead of wasting time listening to calls that didn't need our input. And I think that's a really key point. We recognise that these friendships are real friendships, and we don't want to be that overbearing big brother type figure who's making sure that everything's going on and listening to every single word. What we want to do is just be that protective background influence for an older person and the volunteers. So we worked together with our digital agency that helps develop our system to create a tool that we call Sentiment. So what that tool does is it uses Microsoft Azure's AI transcription service to transcribe a selection of calls for every single match on our service. We then feed in a certain number of risk words into our database, and each one of those words has a risk scoring. And what then happens is the call gets run through the transcription, and based on the risk words that get flagged, the call has a certain risk score. We then set a threshold, so if a certain call goes over a risk score threshold, our team can then go in, listen to the exact timestamp of where a specific word is said. For example, hungry or scam or money. We can go in and listen to the context around that word and conversation. And if our influence is needed there to go and support that older person or the volunteer, we can then go in. It has saved us thousands and thousands of minutes of staff time. And I think the really key point with any sort of tools that we've implemented and will deliver in the future is that AI has a lot of magic in it, and it can do amazing things, but what it can't do is deliver the friendship and connection that our staff and our volunteers are delivering. So what we want AI and any technology we use is to go in, remove all the manual, menial tasks that we're doing every day, and free up time for allowing people to do what people do best, and that's having a real connection. So that tool has saved us thousands of minutes and has helped us to dramatically decrease the waiting time to join the service. And a real great statistic that I like to use is in October 2020, waiting time was around 27 weeks from when an older person referred themselves to when we first contacted them. Fast forward 2 years and that waiting time was down to 0 days, which, although it was due to a number of different factors, without that Sentiment tool and that help of AI, it wouldn't be possible. So it's having a real tangible effect on our service and on older people already, which is unbelievable. And I don't know what we'd do without it, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, incredible. And did you, when you went about implementing it and kind of came up with the ideas internally, did you have any pushback initially? You know, did you have to go through quite a lot of processes to get the agreement to bring it in?
Yes, I think it goes back to that word trust. So for many people, not just older people, but older people especially, can be quite hesitant to take on new technologies, especially in the news at the moment with, you know, AI scams, deep fakes, etc., etc. It was really, really important that we involved older people and our customers at each step of implementing this. So the technology itself was fantastic, and that sorted itself out. It was all about the sort of communication with older people. Firstly, telling them why we're doing what we're doing, telling them how it's going to affect them, and then also giving them time to provide feedback. There were some older people that were hesitant and had concerns about it, which is absolutely fine, and we heard those concerns and made them feel heard, and then we tried to reassure them. We also provided our staff with lots of information to speak to older people, because a lot of older people at first glance might not see the sort of impact of it. Later on down the line, they might come to us with questions. So it's important that not only we kept older people informed, but also the people that are supporting those people. So I think for me, and my advice for anyone who's implementing a tool, especially AI, is to really think about your customers or your consumers or your service users first. Think about put yourself in their shoes, think about how you would feel if that tool was being used with your information or through your service, and then work from there. Think about, okay, what worries might I have, what questions might I ask, and go from there. So the tech itself was great. It was more about implementing that change. And I think being in the charity that I work for, we're always putting older people at the heart of every decision. So it felt quite natural to do that. But for people who are starting up the new business or new charity, I definitely recommend that when using AI. It's really quite easy, and I'm sure you feel the same, Katie, that there's so many off-the-shelf AI tools that we can just jump in and throw in. But I think it's really important first to take a step back, think about the impact it has first, because once you've identified that, it will make the implementation a lot smoother. And it's been quite easy now. We have it as part of our onboarding, and older people don't seem to have too many concerns about it when they come on. And if they do, we're there with the information to help reassure them.
Yeah, I love that. And I think those stats that you've mentioned there clearly show, I mean, that's such a huge difference in terms of that waiting time. Yeah. Have you got any specific stories of kind of individuals or conversations that have been had that have led to something that's really shown and improved just by using the AI technology?
Yeah, I've got a couple of stories. The first one isn't it's a bit of a funny story rather than having too much impact, and I'll tell you one where we've actually been able to help an older person. So when we first rolled it out, obviously myself and the team that helped test this tool, we had to think of as many different swear words and risk words that you can think of, which was quite an interesting time, quite fun. And when we rolled it out, within the first few weeks, we actually had a call that was flagged really high on our risk threshold scores. When we reviewed that call, actually saw that the word porn had been mentioned about 20 to 30 times, which of course alarm bells start ringing. However, we obviously could then go straight to that call, identify each time that word was referenced, and sort of understand the context around it and see if there was any risk there. It actually turns out that the older person was teaching their younger volunteer how to play chess over the phone, which was amazing. Obviously, we were a bit relieved as well. But that's another example of saying that the tool isn't perfect. It doesn't understand context, but we still requires that human input. And I think that's really important, that AI can do lots of things, but it still does need that protective background influence. And actually, it's Christmas time at the time of recording. We had a Christmas card from an older person who wanted to thank us for that protective background influence and for being like Santa's reindeer. I thought I'd get that in there. So that was one example of the tool. But in terms of how it helps an older person, so we had about a year ago, we had a call where it mentioned the word bank, and that was the only mention of any sort of financial risk word. But because we were able to recognise that call and separate it from a call without risk, we were able to review it. And basically what we'd found is that an older person had been followed to the bank by a scammer and asked to withdraw money, and they told their volunteer this. And that was the only mention. It was a very brief mention, but because that tool was able to transcribe it very quickly and tell us, we were then able to call that older person. And actually it turns out that this has happened over a period of months, and lots of money had been lost by this older person. We were then able to get in touch with our safeguarding team, the police, Action Fraud, and able to support that older person in getting their money back, but also making sure that that person that was involved was dealt with in the correct way. So that was something that easily could have been missed without that tool. It would have been luck if we were able to come across that call, but actually with the help of that tool, plus the amazing volunteer who helped to flag that with us and work with us, we were able to help that older person financially. And also it did cause them quite a significant amount of emotional turmoil as well. She was alone. She didn't have anyone else around her, no children, no family, no partner. So we were really their only point of contact. And without that tool, goodness knows what would have happened. So yeah, it was a real lifeline for us and for her as well.
Yeah, incredible. I mean, have you got any metrics and stats around the difference in terms of the calls that you've been able to pick up risks since you've implemented the AI tools versus how many risks you were identifying before those tools were implemented?
Gosh, it's probably hard to quantify exactly because our service has been running since 2005. I've been here for 4 years now. So, I mean, we were reviewing tens of thousands of calls before. And I'd say, just from my own opinion, maybe 1 in 50 of those calls actually presented a risk. The other 49 of them, there was no risk at all, and we were listening to the entirety of those calls, often lasting anywhere from half an hour to 3 hours, as I mentioned. Now that we've got that safeguarding tool implemented, although in terms of actually proper risks identified is probably maybe 1 in 25, it means that we're also listening to that. All of those 25 calls had a risk word there. So at least we're still directing our time. So like I said, it's not perfect. It doesn't get it right every time. There is a chance of false positives, like with the chess story, but we are just a lot more able to direct our time to more meaningful calls and more calls that may have a risk rather than calls that we have no idea, no indication there's a risk.
Yeah. And what was the response from your volunteers? You know, when you kind of explained that you were going to be looking at implementing these new solutions, was there an element of people being unsure about it? Was it embraced? How did people react?
Yeah, a bit of both. I mean, our volunteers, many of them are also older people themselves as well, who give up their time to support other older people. And I think, as I was mentioning, involving older people at the heart of it, we also involved our volunteers. Without our volunteers, we wouldn't have a service to run. So it was really important to include them. I think the main concern from our volunteers was about how this sort of transcription would affect their genuine friendship, that they feel that their conversations were being listened to for no reason. It felt like it wasn't a real friendship. So again, it was about explaining why we were doing that. We were there as a sort of backup in case, you know, they missed something on the call. If they're having a conversation, something got dropped in that the volunteer didn't hear, we were there to help. But also a lot of volunteers were grateful that we were bringing this in, because a lot of volunteers who join us for the first time have concerns that they might miss something or might not be able to recognise a safeguarding risk despite the training that we give them. And I think knowing that we were there in the background to support them if we need to really made them feel reassured, and then if anything, helped to sort of maintain retention of those volunteers, because despite all the training that we provide them, we're all human, and sometimes in conversations we do miss things. So I think they were really, really grateful. But again, it goes back to that trust. It was about explaining why we're doing it, what we're going to do with their information, and listening to them as well, because you can provide them with the best explanation in the world. Sometimes all they want to do is just express their own concerns. So that was really, really important for us. And I think you've got to consider everyone it affects. But now, again, it's not really a concern for many volunteers. And if anything, many volunteers forget about it, which in a way is the best sort of thing, in my opinion. It's faded into the background, but still doing its job. So it's not something that people think of all the time. All they're thinking about is maintaining and creating this lovely friendship that they have over the phone.
I love that. And I think, you know, the fact that it's almost a safety net for them.
Yeah.
You can give your volunteers this sense that, you know, what they're doing, that it is a big responsibility, isn't it? It must carry quite a lot of weight when you're responsible for having those conversations and almost protecting these old people's lives. But to have that safety net behind them that will catch things that perhaps they wouldn't catch, I can see. You can see the benefits there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really key point, is that although volunteers are befriending older people and creating these beautiful friendships, it is also important to know that if there are any safeguarding concerns, we ask them to report them to us. So obviously that does cause worry. All of our volunteers are fantastic at doing it, but as I said, some things do get missed. So it just provides that reassurance that we are always there for them, but at the same time being far enough away and in the background so that it doesn't affect that true, genuine connection that they're having with someone.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. So what would you say, if you could pick kind of the biggest lesson that this journey has taught you, this kind of transition that you guys have made to this kind of human-centered use of AI into CX, what would you say would be the biggest lesson that you've learned personally from it?
Oh, good question. I think it's identify the challenge you've got. That's the first step. And then before you start shopping around for off-the-shelf tools, think about how any technology or any AI tool would affect your customers or your users of your service. I think if we'd have jumped straight in and designed a tool that cost lots of money, implemented it, and then asked for feedback, that's a lot of time wasted, but also a lot of money wasted as well. So it was really important to include your customers from day one and really get them involved. Involve them in the creation of process as well. I mean, it doesn't have to be a tool that you've created and then bring to them the finished product. Involve them in the workshopping of this tool. Involve them in decisions around how it's going to be used. And actually, if you involve them from the start, make them feel seen and heard, you're going to improve that trust. And I think trust is such a rare but vital thing these days, especially with so many services becoming more sort of agent-based and less sort of human connection. Trust is just so important. So I think that's probably the biggest advice, is just involve your customers from the outset. Don't involve them at the end when it's finished. Involve them from the start.
No, I love that. The final question for you is I know that you're quite an advocate of the AI side, as long as it's being considered in terms of all of the risk and the kind of downsides that it could carry. You could take the services that you're offering, let's say 5 years into the future. Are the key things that you're excited about that could be coming? Where are you seeing as you kind of look ahead and you're doing it?
This gets me excited, that. I think the beauty and the magic of our service we're running now, I want the end product to be exactly the same. I don't want that to change. I want older people to receive friendships and volunteers to benefit. But what I want in 5 years' time is for AI to really take away the stuff that prevents volunteers and older people from connecting. So I mentioned about our tool that we're using. It doesn't understand context at the moment. So I would like to look into how it would understand context and remove those false positives. Again, we'll have to really look into what that means for customers' data and safeguarding of their data and making sure that any tool that we use protects that. But I think it's really is about using AI to maximize the magic that only humans can provide. For me, what that looks like, I'm not sure. There's so many exciting things at the moment, but I think improving trust, I think is probably what I'd want to do using technology in 5 years.
I love that sentence, maximize the magic that only humans can provide. And I think a lot of people would resonate with that.
Yeah.
Adam, thank you. It's been really insightful. I'm sure a lot of our listeners will be quite inspired actually by your stories and how you've managed to start implementing and making such a huge difference. It's really lovely to just hear your story and hear the benefits and the kind of metrics, the huge difference that you guys have been able to make. So thank you. It's been lovely to chat. Maybe we get back together in 5 years and see where we've got to.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you, Adam.
Thank you so much, Katie.